Before Elizabeth Barrett Browning was one of the most famous poets of the entire Victorian era, she was a 20-year-old with something serious to prove. So today, we're going to look at her incredibly audacious 1826 collection, An Essay on Mind with Other Poems. This is the moment a young genius really announced herself to the world.
I mean, that's a pretty bold question, right? But that is exactly the challenge she set for herself. It's an act of just incredible intellectual ambition.
Yeah, just 20 years old. Think about that. While most of her peers were, focused on social debuts, she was taking on the biggest, heaviest philosophical questions of her time.
And she was not kidding around. The title poem of this collection is this absolutely breathtaking attempt to chart everything the mind can process. I'm talking from the laws of nature all the way to the mysteries of faith.
So how did she even begin to pull this off? Well, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the sheer ambition behind this whole project. Then we're going to dive into the main poem itself to really map out her argument. We'll also uncover some hidden gems in her other verses. And finally, we'll see how this collection was both this brilliant synthesis of ideas and, really, the end of her poetic apprenticeship.
First things first, let's talk about that ambition. For a young woman in the 1820s, publishing a dense philosophical poem wasn't just unusual, it was a radical act. She was essentially claiming a seat at the philosopher's table, a table that was frankly not built for her. You see, she was writing what's called didactic poetry. This wasn't about simple romance or pretty rhymes about nature. No, this was poetry as a vehicle for a serious, heavyweight philosophical argument. She was stepping into an arena that was completely dominated by men. So how'd she do it? Well, she played the game brilliantly. She published anonymously as, by a young lady, to appear modest, but let's be real, it was an open secret. Everyone in the literary world knew it was her. To prove she had the intellectual firepower, she packed the poem with scholarly footnotes in Latin and Greek, and she directly modeled her work on Alexander Pope's masterpiece. That was a clear signal that she was ready to compete at the absolute highest level.
Okay, so she absolutely established her credentials. But what was she actually arguing in the main event, the essay on mind itself?
First, you have to look at the form she chose. Heroic couplets. This is a very strict, traditional, and logical structure that was super popular in the century before her. You can think of it as the poetic equivalent of building with classical marble pillars. It's all about being strong, ordered, and rational.
Now, her grand argument basically splits the mind into two distinct realms. Book 1 tackles the world of fact, science, history, the mechanics of memory, celebrating figures like Isaac Newton. But then she argues that facts, they just aren't enough. And that brings us to Book 2, where she champions the world of the soul, metaphysics, and poetry, all driven by the raw power of the imagination.
And this, right here, is her core thesis. She admired science, but she was arguing against pure materialism. For her, the human mind wasn't just some complex machine. It was fundamentally connected to something divine. And poetry was the special language that could access that connection.
But that grand, brainy essay was only half the story. The rest of the collection, labeled simply Other Poems, is where we find the real secrets. This is where the intellectual mask comes off, and we get a glimpse of the young woman behind the scholar.
In these shorter poems, she's not a philosopher. She's a daughter, a sister. We see her deep love for her father and her incredible bond with her brother, Bro. And then, in poems like The Dream, she moves away from logic entirely and into the misty, atmospheric world of the Romantics, exploring the subconscious in a way the essay never could. This is where her heart truly starts to show.
And when you put the two parts of the collection together, the super formal essay and the really personal other poems, you see the great synthesis happening. You see the complete mind of Elizabeth Barrett Browning.
And this is what's so fascinating. It perfectly illustrates the central tension and the genius of her work at the stage. She's using the classical, logical forms of a poet like Pope, but she's filling them with the passionate, rebellious, and emotional spirit of a romantic like Lord Byron. It's like she has a classical head and a romantic heart, and they're battling and blending right there on the same page.
So, what does this all mean for her career? Well, this collection is essentially the moment she took off the training wheels. It's the end of her formal apprenticeship as a poet. She has graduated.
So to recap her final exam as an apprentice, the form is pure 18th century classicism. The theme is a grand mapping of the mind. Her key influence is Alexander Pope, and the context is a young woman cleverly navigating the social rules of her time. It's a work of just incredible discipline.
But here's the kicker. After this, she pretty much leaves those rigid heroic couplets behind. This collection proves she had mastered the old forms, which is exactly what gave her the confidence to break them. This is the moment she graduates from being a brilliant student to becoming a true independent poetic force.
This collection is incredibly powerful, but it's not her masterpiece. It's the foundation upon which she would build everything else. And that leaves us with a tantalizing question. If this incredible work was just her warm-up, what kind of masterpieces were yet to come?